difficulties. Hang on. That's a little bit better. Having some technical difficulties. Uh, Before we continue with the gameplay, we're gonna try out reading a little bit of my writing project that we have here. That no one is going to care about if they don't care about comics, but it's my stream. I'm going to do what I want. Okay, so this is a theoretical film franchise. So these would all obviously be movies or TV, and let me pull up the list of projects here. Oh, I should also edit the chat so that it doesn't. Where did where did the chat go? That doesn't matter. So I only have 4 of these projects actually like have a plot write up done, and they're out of order. But the list of projects I have, I should probably find a way to visualize this at some point. But in order, the projects would be a Batman movie. We haven't had a lot of those. A Martian Manhunter movie, which is most likely never happening. A movie about the character called Vigilante. Bear with me there. A Flash movie, a second Batman movie, a Wonder Woman movie, a Green Lantern movie, a Superman movie, like a short film about Clark Kent and Lois Lane, a short film where Batman fights the Joker, an Aquaman movie, a Justice League movie, a second Flash movie, and a short film about uh, the Justice League building the Watchtower. Yeah, Adrian Chase. That one's not connected to the larger universe, really, but I had a very specific vision in mind. I think I updated this to make a little bit more sense. And this is going to make no sense to anyone but you uh, that's in here, Blackstone, because the Martian Manhunter write up is full of deep cuts. we're not gonna read. No, it's gonna be serious. It's a send up to the vigilante movies of the 70s and 80s, but like actually condemning behaving like that. Adrian Chase in Peacemaker was just Deadpool if he was too stupid to realize that he had healing powers. Actually, hang on. We can start with this, with the vigilante movie, because it doesn't connect to anything else. This is the best background music I could put on such short notice. Bear with me. There's I don't need it to be bright yellow, but I want to put something up on the screen to indicate that I'm doing a story time thing. That works. The font doesn't, but we have time to waste. It's a 12-hour stream after all. Actually, changed my mind about what game we might be playing after this, but not important right now. You put up an image of Vigilante. I have been actually workshopping these with other people, but this one I got very little like feedback on. It seemed to work perfectly well as is. Okay, so Vigilante is, as the name implies, a send-up of 70s exploitation movies, or vigilante movies, primarily Death Wish, and is actually set in the 70s. The year is 1974, New York. Adrian Chase is happy as a man in his position can be, anyway. He's district attorney, but fighting a seemingly unwinnable battle against top mafia don Anthony Scarapelli. Adrian is in a loving relationship, though, although for his boyfriend's safety, it must remain secret. Because he's gay. The the dominoes start to fall when Scarapelli escaped what seemed like a surefire. Okay, that says acquittal, but but that's supposed to be conviction. He gets acquitted because one of the witnesses didn't show. Let me fix that real quick. Adrian gets after Scarapelli's acquitted. Adrian gets stressed and overwhelmed, and then he gets sloppy. He gets. Did the music stop? There's me double checking the music's not too loud. He gets sloppy. He got photographed with his boyfriend Dave in a compromising position. His career is teetering on the brink. His relationship is in danger. And Scarapelli sees his chance to silence Chase by killing him and his boyfriend and making it look like a hate crime. But they mistimed it, and his boyfriend Dave was the only one there. Adrian obviously snaps because this is a movie called Vigilante, and he quits his job, trains, buys a shitload of guns, as well as a stylish ski mask and matching costume. I swear to God, if that dog doesn't shut up. He decides to destroy Scarapelli slowly by going after his lieutenants. Cue some brutal 70s action, including an unarmed Adrian getting in a fist fight with Scarapelli's top man. At the halfway point of this theoretical movie, Adrian breaks into okay, that's just a bunch of gibberish. Breaks into what a snitch says is Scarapelli's hideout, but instead he gets into a brutal scrape with two freelance hitmen named Cannon and Saber. Cannon and Saber are two generic like assassin characters, but I included them in this because they're actually a gay couple. We have some very interesting fan art, I will say. Adrian wins, obviously, but he's cornered by police, leaving his latest massacre. He tries to deal with them not non-lethally, but is wounded the worst he's been so far, as well as being unmasked and identified. He makes it to a safe house he bought under another name and starts to recuperate. Months go by, and while the heat on Adrian has died down, he learns on the news that the new DA must have found something on Scarapelli that actually stuck because he flipped on the neighboring crime lords. The final bits of restraint break away as he realizes that they'll be moving him to a protected safe house before flying him out of the country. He's gonna get away. He launches an awesome bloody firefight on the safe house, basically killing every cop and federal agent there before killing Scarapelli with his bare hands. He stands there for a second and looks back at the carnage he left. All of the law enforcement agents that were just doing their job, that he murdered just to kill someone who was going to do probably spend the rest of his life in prison, even with the deal. We hear sirens. Adrian pulls out his revolver. There are a lot of typos. Holy shit! He puts it to his chin, and we cut the credits with a loud bang. Let me pull up a picture real quick. Oh, they actually did appear in a Vigilante comic, huh? Oh yeah. Give me 1 second. Well, that was me testing my write-up abilities. Uh, that's a low-res picture. But Cannon and Saber dressed like this, just so that you know that they're gay. I'm sorry. But apparently there is Cannon and Saber fan art. Who knew? But there was a very simple thing to do. Not a lot of complexity there because it's just meant to be not mindless, but it's just meant to be what it is. And I'm not going to read all four of the things I have here. But Maki, please. That dog, I swear to Christ. But we're going to do the Martian Manhunter recap, which I think is my longest one, and the one that needed the most workshopping. Just so we keep in mind who we're talking about here. Our story opens on John Jones meditating in a hotel in his true Martian form. He sees visions of old Mars, peace, tranquility. Then he sees chaos, family, death, ruins. Then finally a portal, a lab, and a friendly face. Then he comes out of it, puts on his human skin, and leaves for work. Cut to an embassy in the made-up foreign country of Bialia. We follow a very nervous-looking woman who startles upon seeing two clear bad guys, but then bumps into Jean, who says he needs to talk to her. I grew up watching the Justice League cartoon, so it's always pronounced Jean to me. Then the whole the whole embassy explodes, and Jean is barely able to get the woman out in time. Hi, Fizzy. We're reading one of my nerdy comic book like fanfic things that I wrote. We'll be doing something else shortly. Anyway, the embassy explodes, and Jean is barely able to get the woman out in time, albeit in critical condition. Jean has to flee before the authorities arrive. I actually had to look up what color Martian Manhunter's blood is, because I could have sworn it was purple, but then I realized that I was thinking of Piccolo, which is not a bad connection to make, but I decided to just make his blood purple, so that's obviously like alien. Anyway, cut to international man of mystery, King Faraday. We learned that the woman was the aide to an ambassador, and that she had information related to Bialian leadership being infiltrated by a rising group of interest, Cobra. So as he's sorting through this mess, agents of the DEO arrive, the Department of Extranormal Operations. They show up and try to pull rank. And while he manages to throw his weight around and stay in charge, they explain that this is a DEO matter because blood and tissue was found that corresponds to no known organism. While those samples are sent to a man named Hugo, Faraday complains that apparently Cobra has monsters now. Give me 1 second. I was just loading up a picture. The next day after the embassy bombing, Faraday is guessing that the Green Man was trying to kill the ambassador's assistant, who we'll call Aubrey Sparks. Why not? So he leaks that Aubrey is alive, but gives the wrong hospital so that the DEO can catch the Green Man. Meanwhile, Arnold Hugo is doing tests on the purple alien blood and reports his discoveries to Faraday first. Okay, that's a weird sentence. He reports his discoveries to Faraday, who really doesn't give a shit and just says whatever. Uh, and says they'll only update him if Hugo finds a weakness. Hugo's a mite bit obsessed with the grape jam blood. All the plainclothes agents at the hospital are at high alert, but they don't expect that Jean can just read their minds. Also, Jean doesn't even show up because he has no reason to visit Audrey. Or Aubrey. Okay, it's inconsistently written as Aubrey and Audrey. I need to fix that. Anyway. Cobra operatives try to storm the hospital, but the DEO puts them down pretty easily, and Faraday decides to requisition the DEO database to search for more sightings of the Green Man because something's not adding up. Jean returns to his detective job in Colorado. He meets with his captain, Diane Mead, who is... It's ambiguous if she gives him so much leeway because she's a chill boss or because she knows that he's a Martian. Jean was investigating a possible Cobra connection to a human trafficking ring that he was shutting down, but it seems that was a red herring. Faraday has spent 3 weeks no-lifing the database and has resorted to trying to cross-reference travel records with Green Man sightings. He gets lucky when Denver PD detective John Jones gets a perfect match, but he keeps Jones's name to himself in case he's wrong about his hunch. Hugo reports that the alien sample is weak to fire and asks for authorization to conduct more esoteric experiments. And Faraday's like, oh, sure, because he's going back to the CIA after this is over anyway. There is literally no reason for John Jones to not be black in these human guys. It adds more diversity. I don't know when they started doing that in the comics or other media, but it just makes too much sense not to do it that way. My fan casting for Martian Manhunter was actually Lance Reddick until about 6 months ago. But anyway, Jean hears a knock on his door, and it's Faraday, who asks a pretty reasonable question. Lance Reddick is deceased. If you missed that news, rest in peace. Anyway, he asks a pretty reasonable question to John. Why did you fly to Bialia and rent the nearest hotel to the embassy 2 nights before it blew up? And Jean really doesn't have a good answer. He gets even more stressed out when Faraday mentions that they know about his green friend. Things escalate, but then suddenly the agents defy Faraday's orders and burst in, flamethrowers blasting. Jean freaks out, goes green, and faces through the floor, but Faraday's the only one who saw it. Turns out Hugo reported to higher-ups, and that as far as they're concerned, the Cobra stuff is irrelevant. Priority 1, capture or kill the creature. Jean goes to an abandoned lab to recuperate. The sign says Erdale Laboratories. Faraday goes back and double-checks the Green Man reports. And as he suspected, they were all of the Green Man saving people. He even goes to debrief a stabilized Audrey, and she confirms that Jean's the only reason she got out alive. Faraday kicks himself for not listening to his bad feeling earlier, and goes to talk to Jean's captain and manages to convince her that he's a friend, and she tells him where he can likely find John. Faraday enters the lab and sees a wounded John in his true Martian form. Right, give me 1 second. He sees him in his true Martian form meditating. He also sees a shit ton of Oreos, but that's not important. Jean tells him that he knows he's there, and then we get Jean's tragic backstory. Mars used to be a utopia until a plague struck, weakening all Martians' psychic abilities and giving them an extreme weakness to fire. Decades passed, and Martian scientists developed a cure. There's some more gibberish that I should have deleted. But except it wasn't really a cure. It turned into a virus that transformed Martians into aggressive, monstrous albinos who waged war upon the Green Martians. The war burned until Jean was the last Martian alive. And so he wandered a dead planet for God only knows how long until a teleportation experiment by Dr. Saul Erdell brought him to Earth. Erdell was John's first true friend on Earth and left him the lab after he died of a heart attack. Faraday is honestly still stuck on the Green Man from Mars thing and kind of zoned out. But he knows two things. Jean isn't his enemy, and none of this has anything to do with Cobra. So he's about to let Jean just walk. Then Professor Arnold Hugo walks in with some oddly behaving soldiers and a dog. Turns out Hugo is a capital M mad scientist, and he basically just faked the capture and kill order. He also mutated the 3 soldiers and dog with strength and mild shifting so there can be a big dumb fight. Faraday is knocked out and Jean is captured. Jean is tied to a big science chair while Hugo pokes and prods him. We learn that the mutants that he made are already dying, and Hugo's kind of desperate to find a way to fix the process, so he injected his forehead with John juice to become telepathic. Hugo invades his mind to try to find anything that can help him, and we see that he used to be a cop on Mars, a manhunter, and we see the despair that took him after Mars died. Jean reads Hugo's mind back and learned that Hugo's tormented by a fear of humanity wiping itself out, but was never taken seriously enough as a scientist to actually do anything about it. And in his increasing instability, thinks an engineered viral strain of the Martian hybrid stuff will fix the problem. Jean forces his past into Hugo's mind, explaining that like a mutation virus is literally the same thing that wiped out the Martians. And Hugo is like, "You raise a good point." And he actually feels like someone's actually hearing him for the first time. So he's convinced and releases Jean. The 2 remaining mutant soldiers, desperate to stay alive, try to force Jean back in the chair. But Faraday bursts in and kills one, while the other just literally falls apart. Hugo destroys all of his Jean-sourced data and frees the test animals in the lab. Hugo then surrenders himself into DEO custody, where Jean promises to keep in touch with him psychically, even though since he experimented on himself, he probably doesn't have a lot of time left to live. Also, one of the test animals is a basset hound that basically adopts Jean as his new dad. That's not important, I just felt like mentioning it. In the days following, Faraday wipes all mentions of Jean from the reports and records, and they go their separate ways, with Jean feeling vindicated that he is making a difference, but wondering if he can't do more. And a post-credit scene, which I don't plan on doing every time, but it. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Mr. Faraday. I'd shake your hand, but I'm afraid you'd be vaporized. Faraday is summoned by Mr. Bones, who is director of the DEO, and also happens to be a chain-smoking skeleton in an expensive suit. He explains that a sample of Jean's DNA was stolen uh, from Hugo's lab before he destroyed all of the samples. So there's probably a mole in the DEO that they need to worry about. He tells Faraday that he'd like to keep in touch with Jean in exchange for all the intel on Cobra that the DEO gathers, because the world being what it is, they'll probably need the Martians' help later down the line. And that is my book report. I worked really hard on it. Let me look up something real quick. So one of the people, I was just looking up something to kind of add to it. This is uh, probably my best one that I wrote, and also the one that had the most feedback, because originally the movie ended after the fight in the lab, but then I was informed that the movie only had 2 acts and not 3, so I changed it, and now it's better. Uh, and the reason that I included the Basset Hound at the end is because I learned that at one point in the old comics, the Martian Manhunter adopted a dog named Jupiter that appeared in like one issue, and this is the only picture I could find of him. He doesn't have superpowers; he's just a dog. But John seems like a dog guy. The other two write ups that I'm working on are actually I only have one other write up finished. It's the Green Lantern one, but I'm working on the Wonder Woman and Flash write ups right now. But I think that's enough. But hang on. Yeah, it's the only way I knew how to do it. Uh, Apparently, Jupiter the dog was a. I only got informed about Jupiter the dog by someone who was reading this, and he was like, "Did you include a dog as a reference to Jupiter?" And I was like, "Who?" Apparently, Jupiter was like a dog that a Martian Manhunter found that was like kept following around and getting him into trouble. Which is weird because Basset Hounds are actually very lazy dogs. But anyway,